What's up guys, Eber here with HardwareCanucks, and about 3 months ago, Intel announced their new 8th generation mobile processors codenamed Kaby Lake R, specifically designed for Ultrabooks. The specs looked really promising. We're talking quad-core processors jammed inside these ultra-slim form factor notebooks that promise to deliver fantastic multitasking performance along with better battery life over last generation. If you're interested to learn more about these new CPUs, make sure to check out our explain video right over here. But today we're going to test out Intel's claims on these new CPUs, and it's very rare to get the opportunity to benchmark two notebooks side by side featuring processors from different generations, but identical specs in terms of the rest of the hardware. So this video is going to be pretty straightforward. I'll be running a series of synthetic and real-world benchmarks to see what sort of a performance improvement we get with these new processors, but also perhaps come to a conclusion as to whether or not it's worth buying a discounted 7th generation notebook for the holidays, or pick up one of these newer notebooks with the new 8th generation processor. So let's dive in right after this.
So it was kind of a love at first sight, you know? There's really nothing like this exterior. I love the metallic color, the tinted glass panel, the RGB fans at the front. It's basically a see-through case, and who doesn't love that? Your graphics card can go vertical, the top is radiator friendly, and the right side is so unique when exposed thanks to these cable covers. So you can show off everything you've got with the H500P by Cooler Master. Check it out in the description below.
Okay, so the contenders for this test are two notebooks from Dell, more specifically the XPS 13. Both units are powered by Core i7 processors, and the only difference between the two is their microarchitecture and a different memory configuration. Right now, the 8th gen model is about $200 more expensive, but if you factor in Dell's sales into equation, that number jumps up to about $400. On one hand, we have a unit with a Kaby Lake Core i7 7560U processor featuring 2 cores, 4 threads, with a base clock of 2.4 GHz and a boost up to 3.8. It comes with 4 MB of cache and a TDP of just 15 watts. The newer XPS 13 model features the 8th generation Kaby Lake R i7 8550U processor that's quad-core hyper-threaded, comes with a slightly lower base clock of 1.8 GHz, but a maximum turbo frequency up to 4 GHz. It also comes with twice the amount of cache, and surprisingly, the TDP remains the same when compared to last gen. And that last point is important, since Intel was able to achieve this by drastically separating the speeds achieved by single and all-core performance. You see, on the desktop side, we're used to seeing a few hundred megahertz, but in this case, the delta is several gigahertz. Basically, Intel's prioritizing multiple threads over raw frequencies when an application determines all 8 threads are needed. Unfortunately, there isn't a significant increase in graphics performance. Intel did rename it from HD to UHD graphics, implying that these new CPUs can play back 4K content without breaking a sweat. They featured the same 300 MHz base clock, but the boost clock is 100 MHz higher on the 8th generation CPU. Now, coming back to these notebooks, the newer XPS 13 isn't that different from its predecessor in terms of design and features. Both look exactly the same, albeit the 7th gen review sample I got came in this rose gold finish, but you can pick up the newer model in the same color. They featured the exact same 13.3-inch QHD plus Infinity Edge display, and it's really hard to tell the difference between the two because the color reproduction along with viewing angles and brightness levels are on point. The I/O once again remains identical. However, I do want to point out that the older model that I have here comes with 8 GB of LPDDR3 RAM clocked at 1866 MHz versus 16 GB found on the newer model that's clocked at 2133 MHz. The SSDs also vary in size, so the 7th gen model has a 256 GB NVMe drive, whereas the 8th gen has a 512 GB NVMe drive. Now remember, both these notebooks can be configured the way you like directly from Dell's website, so if you want a 7th generation notebook with a Core i5 processor, or 512 GB of storage, or perhaps 16 GB of RAM, you can always do that. Or you could pick up the newer XPS model with a Core i5 8th generation processor, 8 GB of RAM, and perhaps a 512, 256, or a 1 TB variant. Remember, pricing can also vary depending on configuration, and again, this all comes down to what you really want. But in this case, I'm going to be testing two of the higher end versions. So I'll be testing a Core i7 model from the 8th generation and a Core i7 model from the 7th generation, both on the XPS 13 notebooks. All right, so let's move on to the performance segment comparing the two CPUs. Our first round of basic synthetic tests shows the 8550U dishing out roughly 47% more performance compared to the 7th gen 7560U. Programs like Cinebench R15 in the multi-core test takes advantage of the 8550U really well. The OpenGL test doesn't really show a major difference between the two in terms of frame rates, but that was expected considering there isn't a major improvement with the hardware. The same story implies with our real-world tests. The new 8th generation CPUs blaze through multitasking, especially with intensive applications like Handbrake, LuxMark, and WinRAR. GIMP is a slight exception here since it seems like the higher base clock on the 7th gen CPU seems to favor this program, but overall I'm really impressed with the new Kaby Lake R processors. Now, I wouldn't recommend editing videos on both these machines since the lack of a dedicated GPU severely affects render times, but if you were to give it a shot anyway, the 8th generation CPU contributes a lot towards reducing render times. In this case, I ran a 1-minute 4K H.264 export using Premiere Pro CC 2017, and the quad-core architecture on the new CPUs were roughly 20% faster than last gen. That's pretty amazing, guys. I also pushed the integrated graphics on both models, and all I can say is that the new CPUs performs quite well in its low voltage form. It really is a welcoming upgrade from its predecessor. Running Overwatch at 1080p at the lowest setting gave us around 68 frames per second on the newer model when compared to 54 frames per second on the 7th gen model. Dota 2 ran almost neck to neck on both notebooks, and I think part of that had to do with optimizations, but in all honesty, I wouldn't recommend an Ultrabook for gaming because it isn't really meant for that task, unless if you decide to hook up an external GPU, but that's a conversation for another video. As for temperatures, this one wasn't too surprising. Remember, adding more cores into the exact same chassis, in this case, the same notebook, can result in higher idle and low temperatures. As you can see, the newer model did run a little bit hotter than last gen, so do keep that in mind. And this brings us to our last test, battery life. Do note that both these notebooks feature a 60 watt-hour battery, and our heavy load test consists of running real bench on a loop until the battery is completely depleted. Surprisingly, the new 8th gen model surpassed the older one by 50 minutes. But what really blew my mind was during the light load test where I looped refreshing a web page. The new XPS 15 lasted an hour and a half longer than last year's model. This really proves that Intel has done a terrific job balancing performance and power efficiency on these new mobile Kaby Lake R CPUs. Well, the results really do speak for themselves, guys. Intel wasn't really joking with these newer 8th generation CPUs. I mean, we're talking a significant, roughly 50% increase in terms of raw multitasking performance when compared to 7th generation. And what really surprised me the most was the battery life out of both these notebooks when I was doing the comparison test. The 8th generation notebook pretty much did an hour and a half. It lasted an hour and a half longer than the 7th generation notebook, given the fact that it came with a quad-core CPU. And so that to me was just insane. It kind of blew my mind for a second. So it really is an awesome upgrade if you're coming from a Skylake or even a previous generation notebook, or if you're in the market for an Ultrabook. I think right now it's probably the best time to pick up one of these new notebooks. So I'd love to hear your thoughts about this comparison between 7th generation mobile CPUs versus 8th gen. What do you guys think about it? Leave a comment down below. Would you rather spend that money to pick up the newer XPS 13 model, or would you consider getting the discounted 7th generation notebook? Because Dell has some pretty good deals online. So yeah, let me know in the comments down below. I'm Eber with HardwareCanucks. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe for more similar content, and we'll see you in the next one.